She didn't know she was being hunted. Not yet. But the dog did. The moment she turned the corner that evening, something changed in the air, something she couldn't name but felt deep in her bones. The street lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to breathe. Her hand moved instinctively to her pregnant belly, a protective gesture she developed over the past 7 months. And that's when she heard it. Soft paws on concrete. Always a few steps behind. She glanced over her shoulder and her breath caught. A German shepherd, thin, filthy, ribs showing through matted fur, was following her. His coat was the color of shadows and dust, but his eyes were different. Sharp. Intelligent. Haunted. Go home, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog didn't growl. Didn't bark. Didn't even acknowledge her words. He just kept following. Block after block, he maintained the same distance, close enough to matter, far enough to avoid confrontation. When she slowed down, he slowed. When she crossed the street, he crossed too, his movements fluid and deliberate. But here's what made her skin prickle with unease. He wasn't watching her. He was watching everything around her. And that's when she realized, this wasn't a coincidence. Something was very, very wrong. She'd been afraid for weeks now. Not of anything specific, just afraid. The kind of fear that lives in your chest like a second heartbeat, constant and exhausting. Ever since her husband deployed overseas 3 months ago, the apartment felt too empty, the streets too dark, the silence too loud. Being 7 months pregnant and alone wasn't how this was supposed to go. She'd started taking the same route home from work every day, familiarity felt safer. Past the corner store with the flickering neon sign, down the street where Mrs. Chen's cat always sat in the window, left at the intersection with the broken street light they kept promising to fix. Routine. Predictable. Safe. Or so she thought. Tonight felt different. The air was heavier. The shadows deeper. Even the usual sounds of the neighborhood, distant traffic, muffled television sets, the occasional dog barking, seemed muted, as if the world was holding its breath. She pulled her jacket tighter and quickened her pace. The dog matched her speed exactly. I don't have any food, she said over her shoulder, trying to sound firm. You should find someone else to follow. Nothing. Just the steady rhythm of paws on pavement. She tried to ignore him, told herself he was just a stray looking for a meal. Hungry dogs follow people all the time, right? It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean. The dog stopped. She took 3 more steps before realizing he wasn't beside her anymore. When she turned around, her heart lurched into her throat. The German shepherd stood rigid in the middle of the sidewalk, every muscle in his body tense, ears pinned forward like satellite dishes. He was staring into the darkness of an alley she just passed. Staring at something she couldn't see. Hello? She called into the alley, her voice embarrassingly shaky. Silence answered. The dog didn't move. Didn't blink. His body was a statue carved from focused intensity, and for the first time, she noticed the scars, thin white lines crisscrossing his muzzle and shoulders. This wasn't some pampered pet who'd gotten lost. This was a dog who'd seen violence. Who'd survived it. A cold finger of fear traced down her spine. Come on, she whispered, more to herself than the dog. There's nothing there. But there was something there. She could feel it now, that primal instinct that evolution hardwired into human DNA, the one that screams danger before your conscious mind catches up. The alley was too dark, too quiet, and suddenly she understood why the dog had stopped. He was blocking her path. Protecting her from moving forward. Okay, she breathed, taking a step backward. Okay, we'll go around. The moment she moved, the dog moved with her, positioning himself between her body and the alley entrance. He walked sideways, never taking his eyes off the darkness, and she found herself mimicking his caution, her own gaze locked on those shadows that suddenly seemed alive with possibility. They passed the alley. Nothing happened. But the dog's posture didn't relax. If anything, he became more alert, his head swiveling to check behind them every few seconds. And that's when she noticed the pattern. Every dark doorway they passed, he watched it. Every abandoned lot, he watched it. Every parked car with tinted windows, he watched it. He was tracking something. Hunting something. Or maybe, running from something. 3 blocks from her apartment, she made a decision. She stopped walking and turned to face the dog directly. He sat down immediately, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her throat tighten. Who are you? She whispered. The dog tilted his head, and for just a moment, she could have sworn she saw something ancient and sad in those amber eyes. Something that understood far more than any animal should. And then the headlights appeared. The car rolled down the street slowly, too slowly. Normal traffic didn't move like that. Normal drivers didn't cruise through residential neighborhoods at 8 p.m. with their headlights dimmed, scanning the sidewalks like they were searching for something specific. Or someone. She froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet felt welded to the concrete. The car was a dark sedan, maybe blue, maybe black, hard to tell under the failing streetlights. The windows were tinted, but she could make out a silhouette in the driver's seat. A man. Watching her. The car slowed even more. Then stopped. Right in front of her. Her hand flew to her belly again, that automatic maternal gesture, and her mind raced through options. Scream? Run? She was 3 blocks from home, pregnant, alone, and the dog exploded into motion. 1 second he was sitting calmly beside her. The next, he was a blur of fur and fury, launching himself toward the car with a growl so deep and primal it seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. His teeth were bared, his body low and coiled like a weapon, and the sound that came from his throat wasn't just threatening. It was promising. The car's engine revved. Tires squealed. The sedan lurched forward and sped off down the street, its red taillights disappearing around the corner in seconds. She stood there, shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. The dog trotted back to her side, his demeanor shifting instantly from predator to guardian. He sat down again, positioning himself between her and the direction the car had gone, and looked up at her as if to say, "We need to keep moving." "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, that couldn't have been." But it was. She knew it was. That man had been watching her. Waiting for something. And if the dog hadn't been there. She didn't let herself finish the thought. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now despite her trembling hands. "Okay, let's go home." They walked the remaining 3 blocks in tense silence. The dog stayed close now, his body pressed against her leg, and she realized with a jolt that she was grateful for his presence. This stray, this scarred and dirty animal she tried to shoo away, had just saved her from what? She didn't know. Didn't want to know. When they reached her apartment building, she stopped at the entrance and turned to look at him. Really look at him. Beneath the grime and the too-thin frame, she could see the ghost of what he'd once been, strong, disciplined, trained. This wasn't just a stray. This was a working dog. A protector. "Thank you," she said softly. The dog didn't come closer. Instead, he sat down on the sidewalk, facing away from her building, his gaze fixed on the street they just walked. Watching. Waiting. Guarding. "You can come inside," she offered, though she knew her landlord would kill her. "It's cold out here." The dog didn't move. His job, apparently, wasn't finished yet. She went inside alone, but she couldn't shake the image of him sitting there in the darkness, a silent sentinel keeping watch over someone who'd done nothing to earn his loyalty. That night, she barely slept. Morning came with sirens. She jolted awake to the sound of police radios crackling outside her window, the harsh squawk of official voices barking orders. Her first thought was the baby, is something wrong with the baby? But the flutter of movement in her belly reassured her. Her second thought was the dog. She threw on clothes and rushed downstairs, her heart pounding against her ribs. The street was chaos. 3 police cars, lights flashing. Yellow crime scene tape being strung between streetlights. Officers in uniform moving with that purposeful intensity that meant something serious had happened. Something bad. She spotted Officer Martinez first. He lived 2 buildings over and always waved when he saw her. Right now, his face was grim. "Sarah," he said when he noticed her. "You should go back inside." "What happened?" He hesitated, then seemed to realize she wasn't going to leave. "We made an arrest last night. Guy was hiding in the abandoned building on Maple Street." He gestured down the road. "The one on your route home from work." The world tilted slightly. What was he doing there? Martinez's jaw tightened. "Watching. Waiting. We've been tracking him for 3 weeks, he's suspected in multiple assaults on pregnant women in the area." His eyes dropped to her belly, then back to her face. "We think he'd been stalking you specifically for at least a week." The ground seemed to dissolve beneath her feet. But how did you find him?" "What?" "Anonymous tip," Martinez said. "Someone called it in around 9 p.m. last night saying there was suspicious activity in that building. We moved in and found him with binoculars, photographs." He stopped himself. "It's better you don't know the details. Just know that you're safe now. He can't hurt you." 9 p.m. Right after she'd gotten home. Right after the car had driven away. Did anyone else see him? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Was anyone else there? Martinez shook his head. Building was empty except for the suspect. Why do you ask? She opened her mouth to tell him about the dog, about the way he'd walked her home, about the car that had stopped and then fled, but the words died in her throat. Because how could she explain that a stray German shepherd had somehow known? That he'd positioned himself between her and danger without being asked, without being trained, without even being fed? It sounded crazy. And yet. No reason, she said finally. I'm glad you caught him. Martinez nodded and returned to his work. She stood there for a moment longer, watching the officers document the scene, bag evidence, speak in low tones about the monster who'd been planning something unspeakable. The dog had known. She turned to look at the spot where he'd sat last night, keeping watch. Empty now. Of course empty, it was morning, and strays didn't maintain posts in daylight. But still, she felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Guilt? The desperate need to find him and thank him properly? All of the above. She went back inside and called animal control. German shepherd, the woman on the phone repeated. Thin, scarred, maybe 5 or 6 years old? Yes, Sarah said, pacing her small living room. He was in my neighborhood last night. I need to know if he's okay. There was a pause. Then, we know that dog. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. You do. He shows up sometimes. Never lets us get close enough to catch him, but we've been tracking reports for about 8 months now. Always in this general area. The woman's voice softened. His name was Maximum. Or at least, that's what his previous owner called him. Previous owner? Security guard named Daniel Torres. Worked at the industrial complex on 4th Street. Max was his partner, fully trained protection dog, expensive as hell, devoted to that man like you wouldn't believe. A heavy sigh. Torres died 9 months ago. Heart attack while confronting a group trying to break into one of the warehouses. Fought them off long enough for backup to arrive, saved a night shift worker's life in the process. Sarah's chest tightened. And Max was with him when it happened. After Torres died, the dog just left. Nobody could get him to stay anywhere. Torres's family tried, the canine trainers tried, even the worker whose life he'd saved tried to adopt him. Max wouldn't have it. He disappeared into the streets and has been out there ever since. Doing what? Protecting people, apparently. The woman's tone held a mixture of sadness and wonder. We get calls about him every few weeks. He'll follow women walking alone at night, especially pregnant women. He'll position himself between them and potential threats. One woman reported he scared off a mugger. Another said he stayed with her until her Uber arrived. He never gets aggressive unless there's a real threat, and he never asks for anything in return. Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes. He's still working. Yeah, the woman said quietly. He's still working. Still trying to do the job his handler trained him for, even though his handler is gone. Dogs like Max, once they have a purpose, they can't just turn it off. And when they lose their person. She trailed off. Sometimes they keep serving anyway. It's all they know how to do. Can you catch him? Sarah asked. Can you bring him in, give him a home? We've tried. He won't let us. And honestly? The woman's voice dropped. I'm not sure it would be kind. He's not a pet anymore. He's a mission. Forcing him into retirement might break what's left of him. Sarah thanked her and ended the call, but her mind was spinning. Maximum. His name was Maximum. He'd belonged to a hero and now he was trying to be one himself, night after night, street by street, protecting strangers who didn't even know his name. How long could a dog survive like that? The question haunted her all morning. She tried to work, answering emails, reviewing documents, but her focus was shot. All she could think about was that scarred German shepherd sitting alone in the cold, watching over a neighborhood that had forgotten him. By evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. She had to find him. She started walking her usual route just after sunset, retracing the steps from the night before. The police tape was still up on Maple Street, a stark yellow reminder of how close she'd come to becoming a statistic. She shuddered and kept moving. No sign of Max. She tried the next block, then the next, calling his name softly into the gathering darkness. Nothing. A few people gave her strange looks. A pregnant woman wandering around talking to herself probably did look odd, but she didn't care. Where was he? By the third night of searching, she was starting to lose hope. Animal control had warned her that Max moved around, never staying in one place too long. He could be miles away by now, watching over some other unsuspecting woman, providing protection no one had asked him to give. On the fourth night, she found him. Or rather, he found her. She was sitting on a bench near the park, exhausted and discouraged, when she heard the familiar sound of paws on concrete. Her head snapped up, and there he was, emerging from the shadows like a ghost, thinner than before, his limp more pronounced. "Max," she breathed. His ears perked up at his name. He stopped a few feet away, regarding her with those intelligent amber eyes that had seen too much and carried too many sorrows. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted to thank you. For what you did. For saving me and my baby." Max sat down, still maintaining his distance, but something in his posture softened slightly. "They told me about your handler," she continued. "About Daniel Torres. About how he died protecting someone, and how you've been out here ever since, trying to do the same thing." Tears were flowing freely now. "You don't have to do this anymore, Maximum. You don't have to keep fighting. You don't have to keep being alone." The dog's head tilted, and she could have sworn she saw understanding in his eyes. But he didn't move closer. "I can't force you to come home with me," she said. "I know you have a job to do. But please, please let me help you. Let me give you food, get you medical care, give you something after everything you've done." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, woman and dog, both scarred in different ways, both trying to survive in a world that felt too dangerous and too lonely. Then Max stood up, turned away, and started to walk back into the darkness. "Wait." Sarah pushed herself off the bench, her pregnant belly making her movements awkward. "Please don't go." Max stopped, looked back. And that's when she saw it, the hesitation. The internal war playing out behind his eyes. The desperate, wounded part of him that wanted to accept help, to find comfort, to stop hurting. But the trained part, the duty part, wouldn't let him. "Tomorrow," she said, making a decision. "I'll be here tomorrow night. Same time. And I'll bring food. Real food, not scraps. And water. And a blanket. You don't have to come with me, but you don't have to do this alone either." Max held her gaze for 3 heartbeats. Then he disappeared into the night. She kept her promise. Every night for a week, she came to the park with food, water, and a warm blanket. Sometimes Max showed up. Sometimes he didn't. But when he did, he slowly, so slowly, started to trust her. The first night, he wouldn't eat until she walked away. The second night, he ate while she sat on the bench 20 feet away. By the 5th night, he was eating while she sat on the ground just 10 feet from him, talking softly about her day, her fears about becoming a mother, her worry about her husband overseas. Max listened to everything. Never judged. Never interrupted. Just listened. "You'd like him," she said on the 7th night, watching Max work his way through a bowl of high-quality dog food she'd bought specifically for him. "My husband, I mean. He's like you, protective, loyal, always trying to save everyone else even when he needs saving himself." Max's ears twitched. "He's coming home next month," she continued. "Right before the baby's due. I'm scared he won't make it. Scared I'll have to do this alone." She laughed, but it came out shaky. "But I guess I'm not really alone, am I? I've got you. My shadow guardian." That night, when she stood to leave, Max did something he'd never done before. He followed her all the way to her building. And he didn't leave. She turned at the entrance, expecting to see him sitting in his usual spot on the sidewalk. Instead, he was closer, right at the bottom of the steps, his body relaxed for the first time since she'd met him. "Max?" she whispered. He looked up at her, and in that moment, she understood. He'd made a choice. After 9 months of wandering, of protecting strangers, of serving a mission that had no end and no reward, he'd finally decided that maybe, just maybe, he deserved something too. A home. A person. A purpose that didn't require him to slowly destroy himself. "Come inside," she said, opening the door. "Please. Just for tonight. It's cold, and you're hurt, and I have leftover pot roast that you would absolutely love." Max stood up. Hesitated. Then, with the slow deliberation of someone making a monumental decision, he climbed the steps. And walked inside. The transformation wasn't immediate. Max spent the first 3 nights sleeping by the door, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. He flinched at loud noises, refused to let anyone but Sarah touch him, and maintained his vigilant watch even inside the apartment, eyes on the windows, ears tuned to every sound in the hallway. But slowly, day by day, he began to heal. Sarah took him to the vet, who treated his injuries, gave him vaccinations, and declared him remarkably healthy considering his circumstances. She bought him a Real bed, though he preferred sleeping on the floor beside her. She brushed his coat until the matted fur became smooth and the scars, while still visible, weren't so angry-looking. Most importantly, she gave him something he hadn't had in 9 months. Rest. You don't have to patrol anymore, she told him one evening, scratching behind his ears. You can just be a dog. You can play and sleep and eat treats and not worry about protecting anyone. Max leaned into her hand, his eyes closing in contentment. But old habits die hard. When her husband finally came home, a joyful, tearful reunion that made Sarah's heart feel too big for her chest, Max went into full protection mode. He positioned himself between Sarah and this stranger, hackles raised, a low warning growl rumbling in his chest. It's okay, Sarah said quickly. Max, this is James. His safe. His family. James, to his credit, didn't move. He'd been briefed on the Max situation. Sarah had told him everything over their nightly video calls, and he knew better than to rush a trained protection dog. Hey, buddy, James said softly, lowering himself to one knee. I've heard a lot about you. Heard you've been taking care of my girls while I was gone. He extended his hand, palm down, letting Max catch his scent. I owe you everything, you know that? Everything that matters to me is safe because of you. Max's growl faded. He approached cautiously, sniffing James's hand, reading him with senses humans couldn't understand. Whatever he found there must have satisfied him, because after a long moment, he sat down. Acceptance. Good boy, James said, his voice thick with emotion. Good boy, Maximum. 2 weeks later, Sarah went into labor. It was 3 a.m. when her water broke, that classic movie moment that's somehow both exactly and nothing like what they show on screen. James was instantly awake, grabbing bags, calling the hospital, moving with that military efficiency that made her fall in love with him in the first place. And Max? Max went into work mode. He followed them to the door, tried to get in the car with them, and when they had to leave without him, he stationed himself at the apartment window and didn't move. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Just watched. Waiting for his people to come home. The baby, a girl, healthy and perfect and screaming her displeasure at being born, arrived after 12 hours of labor that Sarah would later describe as like being hit by a truck made of other trucks. James cried. Sarah cried. The nurses cried a little too, though they pretended not to. When they finally came home 3 days later, carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets, Max was still at the window. The moment they walked through the door, he approached slowly, carefully, his nose twitching as he took in this new tiny human scent. Sarah held her breath, praying he wouldn't see the baby as a threat. Max sat down. Looked up at Sarah. Then gently, so gently, leaned forward and sniffed the baby's head. The baby's tiny fist reached out and grabbed a tuft of his fur. And Max's tail wagged. For the first time since Daniel Torres died, Max's tail actually wagged. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her living room watching a scene that never failed to make her heart swell. Her daughter, Emma, was attempting to crawl for the first time, a wobbly, determined effort that mostly involved face-planting into the carpet and giggling about it. And right beside her, patient and watchful, was Max. He'd appointed himself Emma's personal guardian from day one. He slept beneath her crib, walked beside her stroller, and carefully positioned his body to cushion her falls when she was learning to sit up. The scarred, broken stray who'd spent 9 months wandering alone now had a purpose again. Protecting his pack. You know, James said, coming up behind Sarah and wrapping his arms around her waist, I did some research on Daniel Torres. Yeah? Guy was a legend in the security community. Saved 4 lives during his career, always put himself on the line for others. James's voice grew quiet. After he died, his family tried to adopt Max, but the dog wouldn't stay. Animal Control tried to place him in a working dog program, but he kept escaping. Everyone thought he was damaged, traumatized, broken. He wasn't broken, Sarah said softly. He was loyal. He was trying to honor his handler the only way he knew how. By saving people, James finished. By protecting women who were vulnerable, just like Torres would have done. They watched Max gently nudge Emma back onto her hands and knees when she rolled onto her back, encouraging her to try again. We should do something, Sarah said suddenly. For Torres's family. They should know that Max is okay now. That their loved one's legacy is still alive. They did more than that. They arranged a meeting, Torres's elderly mother, his sister, his niece who was Emma's age, and brought Max to the park where Daniel used to train him. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. Torres's mother knelt down and Max walked straight into her arms, remembering her even after all this time. "He saved my daughter," Sarah told them, tears streaming down her face. "Your son trained him so well that even after losing everything, Max kept protecting people. He's a hero, just like Daniel was." Torres's mother looked at Max, then at Sarah, then at little Emma sleeping peacefully in her stroller. "Daniel always said Max wasn't just a dog," she said quietly. "He said Max had a soul that understood duty and honor better than most people. I'm glad he finally found a home where he can rest." She smiled through her tears. "But I'm even more glad he kept protecting people after Daniel was gone. That's exactly what my son would have wanted." They visit Torres's grave together now, once a month. Max sits beside the headstone, quiet and solemn, and Sarah tells Daniel Torres about how his dog saved her life. How his training and his legacy lived on in the scars and instincts of an animal who refused to quit serving, even when no one was asking him to serve anymore. That evening, Sarah sat on her apartment floor with Emma in her lap and Max's head resting on her knee. James was making dinner in the kitchen, humming off-key to some song on the radio. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and traffic and the countless small sounds of life happening all around them. "You know what the crazy part is?" Sarah said to Max, scratching behind his ears. "You didn't have to save me. You could have kept walking that night. Could have let me face whatever was out there alone. But you didn't." Max's amber eyes looked up at her with that ancient wisdom that seemed to understand everything. "You chose to protect me even though no one asked you to. Even though you had no reason to trust humans after what you'd been through. You chose duty over safety, sacrifice over comfort." She kissed the top of his scarred head. "You're the best of us, Maximum. The very best." Emma reached out with her chubby baby hands and grabbed Max's fur, squealing with delight when he licked her fingers. The dog who'd been astray, who'd been broken and alone and wandering in the darkness, was now surrounded by love and warmth and the family he'd earned through his courage. Sometimes Sarah still thought about that night, the way the shadows had felt too dark, the way the car had stopped, the way Max had placed himself between her and danger without hesitation. She thought about how close she'd come to becoming another statistic, another tragic story. And she thought about the thin line between horror and hope, how sometimes that line is held by a scarred German shepherd who refuses to quit serving, even when the world has given him every reason to give up. Max had lost his handler. Lost his home. Lost everything that gave his life structure and meaning. But he never lost his purpose. And in the end, that purpose led him home. To them. To Emma's laughter and James's protection and Sarah's love. To a life where he could finally rest. Because he wasn't astray anymore. He was exactly where he belonged.